Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
So we spoke about the Galaxy Fold in the episode that unfortunately we couldn't release, and since then, Samsung are actually cancelling Galaxy Fold orders, unless the customer says that they actually want to proceed. Man, like, how bad of a launch is this?
Yeah, I think overall it's been pretty botched. But I do think this is the right move. Like, it's a really good customer move. They're basically saying, we didn't get it to you when we promised. We're not going to hang on to your money in the meantime if you don't want the phone anymore. And I think that's a really respectable move.
And so they're saying currently they still don't actually know when it's going to ship. So yeah, at least they did the right thing in that regard. But wow, for a much hyped device, it folded pretty quick.
Yeah, I think their message, the only thing I don't agree with is their messaging that it was never a mass market product. I think, it carries the Galaxy brand, which whether we own one or not, it's a substantial brand name and indicates that it's a consumer ready product. If they really didn't believe that, they should have done a similar launch to like Google Glass, where they had like the developer edition or the Explorer edition, where you really had to know that you were signing up for something that was not fully baked yet. And I'm not convinced that's necessarily the case here. I do still believe they made the right move in their subsequent handling of the issues.
So speaking of other Android-based devices that have been cancelled, so we never discussed it, but there was those images going around of a very thick and fat Energizer phone, which touted the world's largest mobile battery, so it could last you a whole week. Looked absolutely horrible, looked like a shiny brick. And it wasn't Energizer themselves so much that were running. It was like this other company with just using the Energizer name. And they had a fundraiser thing for it that were asking $1.2 million for it to get this thing going. And it raised $15,000. So clearly battery life isn't the be all and end all.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I think if they got $1 for everyone who tweeted about how amazing it was and how they want to sacrifice thinness for battery life, they probably would have reached their goal. But the thing is that, a tweet and actually a purchasing action,
handing over money,
two entirely different things. So yeah, clearly the consumer demand is just not there for this. And yeah, I mean, I'll take this time to note that everyone always says that Apple makes their devices thinner, but I've said it before, since iPhone 6, they've only gotten thicker. So I think we've reached like a good point, a good trade-off. Yeah. And this was no trade-off.
And now we move into the product perception category, Photoshop for iPad. Hands-on with it, not personally, but got to watch it done live through a live stream from the 99U Creative Conference by Adobe in New York. So they basically did a 15-minute demo of Photoshop on iPad titled Photoshop, Compositing and Retouching on iPad. This featured Jenny Lyell, the Senior Product Manager, Matthew Richmond, Director of Experience Design. Their setup was a 12.9-inch iPad Pro with the keyboard folio. So kind of running through what happened and my thoughts about the live demo is, first of all, I noticed that with the live stream, they had their footage basically placed within an iPad frame, but the iPad had a home button, so it was a bit of a letdown. And they got it out of the way that basically the release date is 2019. So they're still promising this year and they can't give any specific dates, but basically they're showing this live demo as a way to demonstrate the fact that, yep, they're still serious about it, they're still working on it, and this is more that you can do with this app. So straight off the bat, I'm loving the UI. I love the layers stack. It's actually quite Apple-like, so it's quite fitting being on the iPad Pro. And with this, you can actually pinch zoom to see these layers in detail, much like your traditional layers panel on the desktop version. And within this, they show that, it still retains the masks, adjustment layers, and everything that you've come to expect within that panel. And one of the guys just reiterated that this app is still has the basic building blocks of Photoshop. So don't expect it a dumbed down version. It's still very feature rich. It's more just how you interact with it and how it appears from a user interface perspective. They demonstrated you could zoom into a selection right down to the pixel. Like this pixel looked massive on screen. And then with the Apple Pencil double tap shortcut, they could zoom in and out from the entire document right back down to that pixel very quickly, which is incredible in terms of showing the performance of the iPad Pro and just how handy that shortcut's going to be. So they also said that flipping through shortcuts and stuff within Photoshop also has the keyboard support too, so you're not losing anything there. There's a properties panel that's actually contextual, so this is really awesome. And they also showed that stuff like blend modes and that are previewed live, so there's no loading times, there's no taking away from your work. It's a very fluent and quick and easy process. They also demonstrated the select similar function. So with this, they basically sampled an area of green on this mountainscape, and they wanted to select all, basically create a path around all areas that contain the same color. And that happened instantly, and it saves a heck load of time. Like that would have been, at least over an hour compared to something that they did in a few seconds. And so they then went back to the layer stack, and within this, you can actually double tap on a layer stack and it focuses on that area, and you don't have all the other surrounding layers kind of taking you away from it. So that's sort of very iPad focused behavior, and the way that you're not trying to cram too much onto that screen is very smart. It's not going to feel like the desktop version just scaled down and being hard to actually tap everything. They very much have the designer user experience in mind with this. Pointed out that you can use sliders for brush sizes, which is very much what the touch bar does. And they keep mentioning live previews a lot. And again, referencing the fact that this is actually possible and there aren't those, load times or anything like that because of the power of the device itself and the actual engine that the Photoshop app is running on. One of the coolest things about this app is the on-screen touch modifier. So basically, it's like a circle within a circle. So the small circle is level 1, which acts like Shift key, and level 2, the outer circle, acts like the Alt key. So with this, he showed that the typical behavior of holding down Shift and dragging around a layer fixes it to, a horizontal or vertical or 45-degree, angle. And so he does that. And then without letting go of this touch modifier, he pushes his finger out to level 2, which then acts like an alt click drag to copy the layer, which happens. And you see this other, the layer copied on screen in front of you. And then he, without removing his finger, puts that back into the level 1 circle, and it fixes it to the horizontal axis. So basically this touch modifier acts like switching between Shift and Alt keys, but you're not even letting any fingers go. It's just a gentle little slide back and forth. I think it's really cool to see, and I think it's going to be quite intuitive to use. After watching this, they actually had sent out an email to apply for the beta. It seems to be, it's kind of like a based on your answer of how much you want it. So I've applied for the beta, really hope I get it, and if I do, then I'll be able to give it a proper hands-on experience. Okay, so I'm clearly super hyped about Photoshop for iPad, and I'm keeping a close eye on it. I've never actually asked you, when do you think that this app is going to launch?
Yeah, I'm super excited about Photoshop for iPad. It sounds cool. I think it will launch in September.
Yeah, I reckon if they could tie it in with the launch of iOS 13, that'd be really cool. So, yeah, all right. Well, speaking of events, considering Photoshop for iPad was first previewed at an event, we have Google I/O. So I'm not going to go too deep on this, but we like to kind of give our perspective of the certain things that they announce, particularly, obviously, this time last year, Duplex was the big thing. So did you watch any of it or any highlight reels or anything?
I did watch some components. I didn't watch end to end. I think I watched like the Google I/O in 13 minutes or something like that. So summary video.
It didn't sort of seem to have nowhere near the same amount of punch with the headlines and announcements. It didn't quite carry the weight in terms of tech journalism like it did last time. I think just because of Duplex was such a new wow factor thing. So yeah.
We'll get into Duplex a bit later, but given that you're mentioning last keynote, where did the Duplex ever land for Duplex for voice? Because I've not actually seen any tech write-ups on it in production, so I just had assumed it never shipped, but it seems like it did.
Apparently it has. Yeah. Apparently it has. It's like maybe it's like a slow rollout. You know how people do these app rollouts, and some people may get it, some people won't. I don't know whether it's like that, but people seem to be using it, but there's been no success stories, and at the same token, there's been no horror stories about it. So it was like a lot of hype and talk about it. And obviously we gave our, positive and negative aspects of the technology, but man, it just sort of dissipated. And now that one of these features in this I/O, they're talking about Duplex for web. I'm like, hey, hang on. What about just the main product itself? So yeah. So before we get into that, I'll just quickly run off the fact they announced some hardware here. So Pixel 3a and 3a XL. It's definitely a lot cheaper price point, so $399 US. So compared to a Pixel 3, it loses things like waterproofing and wireless charging. It has a mid-range processor, small storage, stuff like that. It's not made of glass, and things just to make it cheaper. The processing of the images is slower because there's no Pixel Visual Core chip. They did give it a headphone jack though, but apparently the actual glass of the screen itself is weaker too. So taking that sort of stuff into account, this is something that is clearly aimed for a cheaper price point and made new. Like, it's not like a device that has just gotten older and they've dropped the price like Apple tend to do. So do you think this would be the chance for Apple to offer a new iPhone at this price point again? So we obviously have the XR, but that's still a flagship level kind of price point.
I'm not sure.
Because really this follows on from the long talked about rumors of an SE2. That's kind of like the only thing I can tie to this.
Yeah, I think the SE is it's similar in some ways, but different in other ways. In the SE took an existing design and updated all of the internals, right? It basically made no compromise on the internals and kept other elements to keep the cost down. This is essentially a reworked version of the Pixel from the ground up, but keeping some components that I guess are core to the Pixel brand. So it's a little bit different. And I'm not sure Apple is willing to do as much differentiation. So this definitely is clear on its trade-offs. If you want a great camera, Android updates, this is probably a good, and you don't want to pay that much, you don't care about other things, this is a good phone for you. But if you want all the latest features and you want an Android phone, then obviously the Pixel is for you. So yeah, I think Apple is probably playing at the higher end more clearly nowadays. I'm not sure this would be enough to reignite their interest in the, I guess, differentiated market.
So people were saying, okay, this one's got a headphone jack, but the flagship Pixel doesn't, which is kind of like a strange thing to think about. But then people were pointing out, in the tech industry, is it because if you have a headphone jack, it means that you can't, you have to use wired headphones because you can't afford wireless headphones. Therefore, because it's a cheaper phone, that makes sense. Is there anything in that, or
Yeah, I hadn't looked too deeply into it, but that certainly makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that's a good decision if that is their underlying reason.
And then finally, what do you think about the fact that they've named it a 3A, yet it was released 6 months later than the 3? Like, we had obviously 10S and 10R, so they could do that. They are different models of phone, but they launched them at the same time. Is it weird? Like it sounds like it's should sort of be the successor to the 3, but it's not. I don't really know.
Yeah, this lettering business has gotten a bit strange because OnePlus does a similar thing where they release a flagship model, and then they update it a few months later. So not like it's just a facelift, really, like in car terms. And that's always been the T version. So I think like OnePlus 6T, and then then that is the upgraded version, and that's exactly what you're implying here. Is that does the A imply newer and better? And why would a T imply that and not an A? So I think there's there's a bundling on, like a mistake on that. I think of it as, like if you subdivide a property and then you get like a version. Do you see that? Do you know what I mean?
3 is the dominant, and 3A is just is something that falls under the category of 3, but it's lesser because it's like a sub. Yeah, I know what you mean, where you can you've got property and you can subdivide it as I live at 11A or 11B or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the way I kind of envision it, but I think that's pretty arbitrary.
I kind of think they just wanted to choose a letter that was different to any of the other competing devices. So they go, let's go A. So I don't know.
It's like maybe they wanted it to be first in the phone book.
Yeah, something like that. So speaking of interesting choices, Google Home now rebranded as Google Nest. So Nest is, if anyone doesn't realize, is an existing company primarily known for their home security cameras and the like. And Google, I guess, acquired them at some point. And so they've rebranded their Google Home products under Google Nest. So they now have the Google Nest Hub Max instead of the Google Home Max or whatever. That was a new product that was announced as well. It was actually kind of interesting. It was like that sort of home screen thing, but with like a Google Max style speaker at the back of it, like a base. I don't know. Everyone seems to be releasing kind of Frankenstein versions of products lately. So just from this, like this whole renaming thing, do you think that's is it confusing to you, and then beyond that, would that just be confusing to the general consumer? What happens to the actual Google Home device, the actual device called Google Home? Like, they're saying that everything that was Google Home is now under Google Nest. So what is it called? I think I missed that.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake. I don't know. It is a little bit confusing because on the website it still says Google Home Mini. So I don't know, is the Mini not subject to this? And then, it's definitely confusing. But I think there's such a strong brand in Google Home. I think it was a successful home speaker product. And Nest has never been available worldwide. So I think it's an odd choice. I wonder what led to this. Weird.
The only thing I can think of is they wanted to have something that didn't involve the word home to separate themselves from the HomePod, the Galaxy Home. Just, I don't know, or something. Maybe they thought that the Nest brand itself was so strong that they thought, okay, let's merge it. But yeah, it's strange, especially that speaker
business. But only in the US. And then clearly was a company. So it's like, it's just that Google is the company. So why is another company that they bought, it's not like the Beats headphones are called the Apple Beats Power Beats Pro, right?
Yeah.
They're just called the Beats Power Beats Pro.
Yeah. It's weird. I'm glad I'm not that invested in the Google ecosystem because this thing would drive me insane. I mean, we have spoken about just the strange naming choices Apple have done, but I think this one is even more head scratching. Android Q, they just rolled out, gets a dark theme. We're expecting dark mode with next iOS too, so nothing major there. A feature that I found quite interesting was these live captions on videos. So apparently it applies to just your own videos you have, videos that you're watching, video chats and things like that. So that technology, I think, was probably the biggest wow factor they had at the entire event. But I'll get your thoughts on that after. There's an incognito version for Google Maps. Stuff they're doing with Google Lens was pretty cool. So they've sort of partnered with some magazines to have interactive content. They did a demo where they point the camera at a receipt and then it gets the figures and pulls out the calculator and you can split the bill and stuff. So stuff like that's definitely really handy in terms of real world use. And then they expanded upon the whole sort of power down and phone restriction type of stuff with a thing called focus mode, where basically any apps, I guess, you select that you deem distracting, you won't be able to access them after a certain time and things like that. So that lineup of kind of random features, any of that impress you?
Yeah, I'm quite impressed by the live captioning. It's a great accessibility feature.
Yeah, definitely.
From a technical standpoint, I'm also interested in how they're actually doing it. I would imagine that for performance and security reasons, that the voice to text model, machine learning model, is actually built into the device rather than it being processed through the web. So I would imagine that that's the case. And if that is the case, I think it's really good use of the technology. And I have noticed Apple has pushed other companies to be more focused on security and accessibility. And even like this was something we always say, Apple's not necessarily first, but these are two areas where they definitely were first in the mass consumer market to have them fundamentally part of their products. And it's good to see other companies copy these features because they're important for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. What about I guess with the Google Lens stuff, that's kind of what I always presumed like a first thing in terms of like augmented reality that people would find useful is just like those exact demos they did. Like you're flicking through a magazine, obviously there's a layout and you want to bring it to life. Okay, yep, Google Lens allows that. And then, the example of actually kind of like scanning and reading what's on the receipt. And I thought those two things were cool in terms of like, it's not just like, oh, wow, here's a massive 3D game or whatever. And it's like something that's more of a, something that you just do in everyday life, I guess.
I think that is convenient.
Yeah. Google Duplex. So we mentioned it briefly before. It's now for the web. So what are they doing with this?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's no longer voice only. So it can complete web-based tasks in Chrome. And had a demo of someone booking a car on a website using the data Google has on you from like your Gmail. And they also have Google Trips, which is one of the other apps, and Calendar and the previous reservations on that site, like your preferences for cars and stuff.
Yeah.
So it navigates through the website while you're watching. So I'm pretty sure you could cancel if it starts booking, some limousine or something accidentally. But it was pretty cool because you're basically giving, I think from memory, it said you have a trip coming up and then like surfaced an option. It was kind of suggesting that you use this feature, at least for the demos. But yeah, it looks pretty cool.
So it's sort of like a real impressive expansion upon autofill in a way. So they're already grabbing that data they have, and then it's probably simple enough. Okay, I say this as a non-developer to be able to know. Okay, yeah, well, this is the car site they go to, and they go in there, and they're just going to look for the form tag, wherever the booking form is, and it's going to auto scroll to that section and etc. So yeah, I certainly think it's cool. It definitely has far less of the creep factor than the actual voice duplex thing did, because there isn't that actual human interaction. So yeah, I mean, I could see Apple kind of doing something like this, but to me it's really like autofill on steroids.
Well, exactly, but it's actually for me a lesser version of duplex than the voice version. I feel like this is easier because they're saying we are doing it with certain supported websites. It's not, you can't just do anything on any website.
Okay.
Right. You can't do that. So I think they have certain websites that they support, in which case you can kind of manually build up that over time, or build up that that automation easier than on any website for anything.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to this is I've only ever booked a car online once. I know it's a cool demo, but I don't really think I'm going to be doing it as a regular thing, yeah.
It does depend on who... Yeah, it's definitely not a mass market thing. They should have rather shown flights.
Oh,
Flights
yeah.
is way better.
Yeah.
And they already have Google Flights, which is an amazing product of theirs. So if they integrated that with voice, it's far easier and far more useful, far cooler.
So I think the fact, okay, they've called it Duplex for web because they want to put it under that banner, but really it is just a separate thing altogether. So mind you though, I mean, I say that and Siri obviously wears multiple hats too. So yeah, it's probably fair enough to call it Duplex, but it's kind of like, is it really sort of just like Google Assistant anyway? I don't know. Anyway. Okay, speaking of Google Assistant though, they're switching it to have all the processing, or a lot more of the processing on device, which has resulted in 10 times the speed of the actual response. So the example they gave of this was actually really quite impressive, because anything to reduce the delay between what happens on screen or the response you get and the input you're giving is just going to make more people get confident with using AI, really. So first of all, what did you think of that? And then do you think, just on a overarching theme, will Apple ever be able to break the impression to so many people that Siri is dumb?
Moving to on-device processing is great, and for a whole host of reasons. So I think I can't fault that. I think it's great. On Siri being dumb, I'm not sure there's much that Apple can really do. I feel like no matter what they do, there'll always be that perception.
That sort of feedback is more within just these tech bubbles and that we're involved in. Whereas I know so many people that just general consumer, they don't even follow tech or anything. They've got their iPhone, whatever. And I've seen people and they're just like using Siri and they're getting the answers they need and they're doing the things that they want. And there's no part of them that thinks, oh, this thing is stupid because it's doing the actions that they require. And really the overall thing of voice assistants is just people getting more confident to use it publicly and not feel embarrassed to try and give a voice command. And so I think on a widespread public level, there isn't that perception. It's more just within all these tech reviewers and everything constantly pitching Siri against other voice assistants.
If it was that dumb, not that many people would use it, right? And they get a lot of requests. They've said that as much on stage. But if you look at the latest version of AirPods, pretty much the only differentiating factor is wireless or Hello Siri support. And as a flagship or pretty much only differentiating feature, why would they bother if it was not heavily used and liked? So I think it's all about the tech bubble. There's room for improvement, but still.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there are instances where I'm like, oh, okay, I wish that would have worked or whatever. But there's other factors like your race to Siri that I use all the time. If you're not aware, we've got a sponsor. Big thanks to The Sizzle. Are you sick of trawling through blogs full of ads and sponsored content, social media riddled with influencers and a collection of RSS feeds that never seem to end, just to stay on top of what's going on in the tech industry? Our new sponsor, The Sizzle, can remove that burden for you. One email a day, delivered to your inbox every afternoon. It packs all the important tech news into an easy-to-read, ad-free, PR-free, influencer-free summary. Sign up now at thesizzle.com.au/slice. We subscribe and enjoy it. And if you like this podcast, well, you probably will too. So head on over to thesizzle.com.au/slice and sign up for the newsletter now. Thanks again to The Sizzle for sponsoring us. Sundar Pichai, head of Google, took this moment to take a bit of a dig at Apple in regards to privacy. So he said, for us, that means privacy cannot be a luxury good offered to people who can afford to buy premium products and services. Privacy must be equally available to everyone in the world. So essentially he's saying, okay, obviously there's within these big tech companies, there's this big privacy wars with Apple definitely much at the forefront, and they've been doing it for years. And it's like suddenly people are like, oh, hey, people are actually concerned about this. Let's jump on board. And you've got Google's always kind of like rode that line between actually being, focused on it versus someone like Facebook who are suddenly scrambling to try and rebrand themselves as privacy first, which is just ridiculous. So what Google is saying is that, okay, Apple are going out there saying that we are the company for privacy. Like, we have that part, in mind most with our products versus anything else. But he's saying because their products cost more, the whole right to have privacy shouldn't come at the fact that you have to buy an Apple product because it's more expensive. So where do you feel like what's your reaction to what he said?
He's right. It shouldn't be a luxury good, but that's not to say that. What does that mean, right? He's saying it shouldn't be a luxury good, but people are it's being taken as a swipe at Apple. Basically, you're a luxury good, and that's why you can afford give privacy. But if you look at it, who is it on to serve the rest of the market? It's people who already serve that market, right? It's Google and Facebook and other free players. It's on them to make those privacy improvements, not on Apple to expand its market. It's already serving the market that it plays in appropriately. So you can't really say Apple, you should make, some cheap device so that everyone can have privacy by using a product. No, it's got to be the cheap products or free products need to embed that privacy there. So yeah, I think it should be look internally rather than externally in this case. And I think what is defined as private is not appropriate anymore. I think probably at the beginning of social media days, privacy could have been defined then as the company takes all your data and doesn't share it with anyone. But now it's that the company shouldn't have unnecessary data. They should have operational data, and that's it. And now Facebook is trying to say, we won't share your data with third parties without your permission kind of privacy. Well, no, that's not really privacy anymore. You had the chance for that to be privacy, but now I think the standards should be higher. Because we know what happens when they do have, extra data on you. We know already.
Yeah. And I think on the Google side of things, in terms of actual hardware, their lineup of hardware, really their affordable products just come down to Google Home Mini and the Pixel 3a, because their other devices are, Apple flagship pricing, really. So,
that's correct.
Yeah.
And the other thing about speaking of the Nest Home Max, that actually received a price drop as part of some recent store update too. So we saw the HomePod get a price drop a few weeks ago, and this is also. So I think it was more expensive than the HomePod, and now it's cheaper. I think it's $399 Australian dollars. I still wouldn't get one. Now, the other thing the last thing I did want to say on privacy seems to be slipping my mind.
You want to keep it private?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, actually, I remember now. With the Home Nest video thing majig Max, the Home Hub, Google Nest Hub Max. Google Nest Hub Max.
Yeah, far out.
That is a mouthful. I didn't realize quite how much of a mouthful it was till I said it out loud. That has a camera on it, which the old or the other Nest Hub does not have. And so as part of the press demos, the press asked, is it being used?
Is it constantly watching?
Yeah, well, is it being used for advertising? And then the product manager said, oh no, we'll never use it for advertising. And then some PR person from Google quickly was like, no, we can never say never. So that was hilarious.
That's
and
awkward.
That to me, it goes back to the privacy thing. Well, how can you tell me that a video used for surfacing advertising maintains privacy? It doesn't feel right.
Well, I think they should have, kept quiet about that maybe, unless they were confident what to say. But speaking of keeping quiet, Apple Carnegie Library. Sorry, I was really struggling for a segue there. So we moved into the exclusively Apple section. Yeah, nice. Okay, so Nick, take it away. What have Apple done with their latest store unveiling?
Yeah, this is a beautiful store. It's in Washington, D.C., and Tim Cook labeled it Apple's most historic, ambitious restoration by far in the world. And when I read that, I was like, whatever, you've just put a store in a library, no big deal. The library last served as a proper library in 1972, and they had a grand opening on the 11th of May with the Washington, D.C. mayor. And it turns out that over the years, they've changed the purpose. As I said, it was last used as a library in 1972. They've changed the usage of the library and also its look. So they haven't quite maintained that historic feel. And so Apple redid all of that stuff to make it not necessarily in its original state, but in an appropriate state to convey an historic library. So yeah, when he says it was an ambitious restoration, it really was. They put in a lot of effort to make it look beautiful and be functional. One of the coolest things there is they have I think it's called Apple Boardroom, and then I don't know the other room, but it looks like a living room.
There's the experience room.
Yeah, and that looks like a place built for a HomePod. That's just...
Yes.
You could just chill out in that lounge with some music and a drink, and, what more do you want? So I feel like that's a gathering place. Why can't we go gather there with our mates? I think that's pretty cool. But I think this is a beautiful store, and I was actually impressed when I looked into details.
Yeah, I certainly think, just looking at these photos, that outside of Apple Park or the visitor center, which I've already been to, is that this would definitely be like a must visit Apple location, because it's just so unique in the sense that it brings in a lot of the aesthetics that they have done with these Apple Store redesigns, but just very respectfully melding it with that original kind of architecture and library feel. So everything is very spacious, massive ceilings. You're certainly not going to feel cramped in this. Even with the launch and just those lines of people going in, it still didn't look like there was still enough room to move around, which I think is great. And they've introduced these cool little sort of thin strip LED lamps, like downlights, which I think looks quite classy too. So yeah, I think just the fact that they didn't just go, let's just completely make this just like another Apple store, and do our take on it, but it definitely looks very Washington. It kind of looks quite presidential as well.
Yeah.
But I would love to go there.
Yeah, it's a very classy venue. I'm a fan.
So speaking of other places to visit, which we unfortunately will never get to because it's placed in the center of Apple Park, is this mysterious new rainbow stage called Apple Stage. So some drone footage gathered some visuals of these rainbow arches placed on this stage in the middle of Apple Park. And it's basically being set up for a special event on May 17th. And so Johnny Ive naturally is behind this. And he said the idea for the rainbow was one of those rare occasions where the earliest thoughts worked on a number of different fronts. So he said it ties to the rainbow logo, which is very much part of Apple's identity. It's a positive and joyful expression of their values involving inclusion. He said the semicircle itself definitely relates very well to the fact that, the Apple Park is a ring itself. And he also, I thought this last one was funny, it's hard to find somebody that doesn't love a rainbow. So in terms of structurally, it's made up of 25,000 different parts. There are all these aluminium frames with these custom curves on it. This is interesting. The curves, the tops and the bottoms are individually rolled by a machinist over a 12-day period. It's of course they are. Johnny, of course that is how it's made. And the actual segments itself are wrapped in a polycarbonate liner that extends over the edge to kind of hide the aluminium factor, and it makes everything look seamless. So it's not just a case of, okay, let's just chuck up some arches in some pretty colours. He just went full Johnny Ive on it. And they're actually dismantling it after this event, but they say it can be reassembled, so I'm thinking beer bash and things like that. So, yeah, a nice little surprise. What did you think of this when you first saw it?
I was embarrassed that when I saw it for the very first time, I thought it was just a blow up cheap for a day kind of thing.
I know, I thought it was like a bouncy castle.
Exactly. I was like, oh yeah, maybe just some quick event. Meanwhile, they've put Apple designers and they even had architects on this thing. It's like crazy. Yeah, I found it to be absolutely... This was, as you say, full Johnny. I don't think he knows how to do 50% Johnny. Clearly, he does not.
Yeah.
So, why not?
Yeah,
I thought
full Johnny
cool.
or GTFO. Oh, yeah. So do you think this, while it's for an event, like, for their employees, do you think they could ever hold some form of actual live streamed, product or software related thing here? Like go a bit Google I/O with it and hold something outdoors?
I find it unlikely. I think they prefer controlled environments.
Oh, exactly. And they want the mystique of the darkness and the dedicated, focus on a indoor screen and everything. So, yeah, I just think, do you think we're ever going to see video footage again of Tim Cook dancing? That's what I want.
So do I. Don't we all? Nothing makes a better gift than, someone in this position letting loose for a bit.
This year, a 10-hour update. They're saying that a couple of the colours are going to be replaced. So what's the lineup going to be now?
Yeah, so coral and blue to be replaced by green and lavender to make the overall lineup black, white, yellow, product red, and then green and lavender.
So is this like a surprise at all? Do you think this is based on popularity?
It might have to be. I can't imagine why else they would do that. But I would not have thought so.
Okay.
I would have thought that blue would have been the most popular, other than black and white.
I thought coral was going to be the least, so that didn't surprise me, but blue did.
But it was... I think it's actually nice looking. I think a lot of reviewers thought so.
Oh yeah, personally I do. I just think that out of all the options in terms of thinking what people would jump for, I can imagine them skimming over coral, being like, oh no, I'd want a full black. I want to... we have someone at work who's just got a 10R update their device and they got the yellow one. So they're like, wow, look at the color of my phone. I was like,
I had a guy at work who wanted one, and I actually campaigned for him not to get that. I was like, you're going to regret that. It's like, seriously. Luckily, the special at JB didn't include that model, and he just ended up not going for that. But I was like, oh god, you lucked out.
Okay, so if not green and lavender, what would you like to see? For me, I'd love to see, so rather than lavender, see an aubergine, like a real dark purple. I can actually have the full back be dark, and then the dark purple metal frame. I think that'd be cool.
I think, I like black, so it's hard for me to give a color. Probably the only other color I can think of is like a purpley color, but you've already said that with aubergine, right? So
I was thinking they could, in terms of a bright color, they could go teal to replace blue. That could be cool. But yeah. Anyway, moving on to some edible extras. Apple Pay NFC stickers. So at a recent event, the VP of Apple Pay, Jennifer Bailey, announced that there's going to be these new stickers that can basically trigger an Apple Pay purchase when tapped. So they're partnering with Bird Scooters, Pay by Phone Parking, and Bonobos Clothing. I'd never heard of that place, but that's pretty cool. Especially the car parking part, I think. Just be able to do that.
I think the scooters... Or bike share, because so many times I'm in the city and I always forget to register for Melbourne bikes, and then I really want to use one, and then so this is perfect because it takes away all of that. You don't need the app installed, so it takes away all of that initial upfront headache, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah,
it's great for it has to be obviously for fixed price purchases.
Yeah.
Because how else would the NFC sticker update?
Well, I'm just thinking about the spec because the scooter stuff isn't fixed price. It's based on time, but no, would you would you scan it first and then it charges when you finish the session? Perhaps.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to find out more. But it seems like it could be easy enough to roll out. Might say if they iron out any kinks, there's going to be. But in terms of just being able to issue stickers to providers of services like this. I think it's a pretty cool option to go with. Watch Pride Face got an update. I haven't actually seen it yet.
Do you use it?
In general, I don't because of I loved it when it came out, but because I'm so used to the infograph and stuff, I never stuck with it. But yeah.
Well, I use mine when I use my Pride band. for the
of course,
matching effect.
So have you seen the new one there? Like, is it on your?
Yeah, for sure. So just on the previous point, I love the way that those match perfectly with the stripes in the band. But this, I'm hoping, carries through to a 2019 digital version. Implying that we could get a sport loop.
Yes, okay.
Well, I'm hoping we get a sport loop version, because my main issue is that the white contrasts with the black watch that I have too much, and I don't wear it that often.
All right. Yep.
Now, if we had a solid color version, those look better. Like the original Pride, I think was nylon band.
Yes, nylon,
the original Pride nylon band looks great with the black Apple Watch. The colors, don't contrast like black and white. So I'm hoping that indicates that. But the new, it actually comes in two different styles now. It has the Pride Digital, which had you can either choose the 2018 or 2019 version.
Yep.
And then you get the Pride Analog.
Yes.
Which has a full screen or circular mode. It's similar to like other areas of the watch that have these kind of circular or full screen, but the animations are way better this year. They are live where you press. Before it was just a canned animation.
Yeah.
Now, if you press more rapidly, the colored strings behave more.
Well, actually interactive now. Yeah.
Yeah. They're interactive, so they respond where and how hard you press them and how often you press them. So
cool.
It's much more fun. So now I've got I only have 6 watch faces, 3 of which are now Pride ones. So they're pretty cool. And also the order of the colors on the full screen analog face change every time you raise your wrist.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's not always just orange on the outside and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think they're pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I certainly think there's going to be another Pride band release for sure. Okay, so lastly, Apple Arcade, which we covered when they did the March event. On their developer site for it, they always had a section asking developers, hey, you can pitch your games to us, and they're sort of upping that ante a bit, and they pushed out a big email blast, which to me proves that the service is definitely gaining traction behind the scenes, with another description of, okay, yes, this is what Apple Arcade is, and they finished it off with, if you're working on a groundbreaking unreleased game and would like to have it be considered for Apple Arcade, we'd love to hear from you. So yeah, I'm still really excited for this service in general, and yeah, I would be very intrigued as to, okay, they're going to launch with this over 100 games, and how many games are going to be added, like at what rate can we expect it, considering they're sort of opening the platform to be like, hey, developers, give us your most creative stuff. So, yeah.
So Apple is essentially becoming this is a VC company for only games. They're investing money in games for a return for 30% of the business, or whatever their subscription cost is. I mean, they whatever they take off the top, that's their ownership of your game, really. Yep. So it's a pretty interesting business model for Apple to get into VC, because these are unreleased games, right? So it's like early stage VC publicly. So it's an interesting space. And I wonder how many, are they hiring? Who makes this decision? What is their background? Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, there's very exciting stuff to see.
How do you get that job?
Hopefully we find out more at WWDC if they touch on this service. So that brings us to the end of episode 74 of Apple Slice. You can find us, we are part of Ozcast Network. Head to auscastnetwork.com to check out us and plenty of other great podcasts. Thanks again to our sponsor, The Sizzle. You can get a trial subscription to the newsletter at thesizzle.com.au/slice. Please search in your player if you haven't already for us, and subscribe. Leave a review in the Apple Podcast app would be greatly appreciated. And everything is posted to appleslice.com.au. Less than 3 weeks, Nick, until WWDC.
I can't believe it.
I can feel it. I remember when they released the invites, I was like, it's so long away. And then now it's it's literally around the corner.
It's really exciting.
Very cool. All right. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about in the next episode, and probably some WWDC predictions. So I'll catch you then.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.